This video contains descriptions of disturbing scenarios that some viewers may find distressing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and in this episode, we are starting a new series. Before I get started, I want to let everyone know that I finally have merch available. You can find links to a few items below each video, and I'll have a link to the shop in the description. This new series will cover the tragic death of Anthony Tony Mitchell, who was killed by staff at the county jail in Walker County, Alabama. A viewer brought this case to my attention, and when I saw the amount of corruption happening in Walker County, I knew I wanted to cover it. This episode is an introduction to what Tony endured and to those who were responsible for his death. On January 12, 2023, Walker County 911 received a call from a family member of Tony Mitchell. Tony was 33 and had struggled with an addiction to methamphetamine. The family member was worried that Tony was becoming delusional and asked for deputies to perform a welfare check and requested an ambulance be sent. When deputies arrived at Tony's house in Carbon Hill, Alabama, they alleged that Tony brandished a firearm and fired a shot at them before running into the woods behind his house. It was reported that the SWAT team was called in, and they were able to arrest Tony without further incident. Or so they said. Tony was transported to Walker County Jail and charged with attempted murder. When Tony arrived at the jail, he showed signs of severe mental distress. He was speaking about demons and portals. He wasn't able to stand or walk without being assisted and couldn't dress or undress himself. One of the correctional officers, Joshua Connor Jones, would later state that Tony was disoriented, non-combative, and couldn't follow instructions. Jones said it was obvious that Tony needed medical care, but instead of obtaining immediate medical attention for Tony, officers placed him in the drunk tank, a concrete cell with no bedding, no toilet, no running water. During his incarceration, Tony was often found naked, wet, cold, and covered in human waste, lying on the concrete floor without a mat or a blanket. Throughout the 2 weeks that Tony was incarcerated at Walker County Jail, his condition deteriorated. Jones admitted that he and other officers actively chose not to provide care to Tony. Their reason was that he had shot at the deputies, and according to some of the jailers, the deputies should have killed him rather than take him to the jail for them to have to deal with him. On the morning of January 26, 2023, a nurse repeatedly informed jail supervisors that Tony urgently required hospitalization to prevent death. However, instead of calling an ambulance, officials waited for another 3 hours before they finally transported him to the hospital. Upon arrival to the hospital, Tony's internal body temperature was only 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite medical efforts, he was pronounced dead at 1:15 p.m. His death was eventually ruled a homicide and was caused from hypothermia and sepsis resulting from medical neglect and the abuse he suffered at the hands of the correctional officers. When news first broke about Tony's death, the Walker County Sheriff's Office released a statement that Tony was fine when he left the jail and later died at the hospital. But then a video was released that showed what really happened. Tony wasn't fine. He had to be carried to the patrol car to be transported to the hospital. After that video was released, Tony's family filed a wrongful death suit. The lawsuit was the catalyst that started an FBI investigation into his death. Since then, 10 jail staff members have been charged in connection to Tony's homicide, and 2 sheriff's deputies were indicted this week. Joshua Connor Jones was the first jailer to be charged in Tony's death. He agreed to plead guilty to conspiring with other Walker County jail staff to violate Tony's constitutional rights by depriving him of humane conditions of confinement, including but not limited to adequate food, clothing, shelter, sanitation, and medical and mental health care, which resulted in his death. In his plea, Jones admitted that, quote, "Collectively we did it, we killed him," end quote. He also admitted to assaulting another inmate and falsifying reports to cover it up. Jailer Karen Kelly was charged with deprivation of rights under the color of law and agreed to a guilty plea. She stated that she shared her concerns about Tony's condition to her immediate supervisor, but she didn't share it with other staff or alert the proper authorities due to the culture at the jail and fear of retaliation. Kelly is the one who leaked surveillance video of Tony while he was in custody. She was once Corrections Officer of the Month in July of 2021. Jailer Bailey Clark Gainey agreed to plead guilty to criminal conspiracy to deprive an inmate of their rights. He admitted to recognizing that Tony's condition was deteriorating, but failed to help him. He said that he feared it would hurt any future law enforcement opportunities. Former jailer Heather Lasha Craig agreed to plead guilty to deprivation of rights under color of law. She realized that Tony's condition could lead to his death, but said she didn't report it for fear of retaliation. Grayson Colin Woods, a jailer who worked the night shift for a portion of Tony's 2-week confinement, agreed to plead guilty to deprivation of rights under color of law. According to the filing, Woods believed that Tony would be at great risk of serious harm if he didn't get help. Woods reported it to a nurse, but then lied about not remembering which nurse it was, as to protect that nurse. Psychiatric nurse practitioner Daniel Wires agreed to plead guilty to a federal charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of law. He failed to provide care to Tony, fearing job ramifications if he offered care against the perceived prevailing culture at the jail. Wires is also listed as a deacon at Parish Church of Christ in Parrish, Alabama. Jailer Daniel Lee Allen Brown agreed to plead guilty to deprivation of rights under the color of law. In the plea agreement, Brown admitted that the holding cell that Tony was in was, quote, particularly cold in the jail, especially in the winter, and that lying on the bare cement floor while naked in that temperature was cruel, end quote. Jailer Megan Johnson agreed to plead guilty to a federal charge of criminal conspiracy to deprive an inmate of their rights. She falsely claimed that Tony was too combative for medical attention and denied a nurse access to him. Megan was Corrections Officer of the Month in August of 2021. Jailer Cortland Brent Jones agreed to plead guilty to a charge of deprivation of rights under color of law. He reported Tony's condition to medical staff, but they told him that Tony couldn't be evaluated because he was combative. Jones never saw Tony to be combative. Jones also echoed other jailers that he heard comments about Tony getting what he deserved for shooting at an officer. In January of 2025, former Walker County Lieutenant Benjamin Shoemaker initially agreed to plead guilty to 3 federal counts of deprivation of civil rights under color of law. He admitted to conspiring with other jailers to maintain filthy conditions in the jail so that when the county commissioner visited the jailers could use the conditions as a testament to the hardships they faced at their jobs. Their hope was that the commissioners would increase their pay. Shoemaker convinced another inmate to act mentally unwell when the commissioner visited. After the visit, the inmate was rewarded with a pack of honey buns. Shoemaker is also accused of assaulting 2 other inmates. On November 17, 2022, Shoemaker allegedly put an inmate in a headlock while other officers punched him to teach him a lesson for a previous escape. Shoemaker ended up with the inmate's blood on his uniform, and at a meeting later that night, he was hailed a role model because of those bloody clothes. Shoemaker was promoted to a lieutenant after that incident, and it was allegedly a direct reward of that assault. Shoemaker is also accused of assaulting another inmate on January 12, 2023. He allegedly tackled an inmate in his cell because he wouldn't comply with an order. He placed the inmate in a restraint chair, and he and another jailer punched the inmate repeatedly in the stomach and head. On February 13, 2025, Shoemaker changed his plea to not guilty. On Tuesday, March 4, 2025, 2 Walker County deputies were indicted by a federal grand jury on charges of deprivation of rights. These are the first 2 to be indicted that weren't jail staff. Carl Lofton Carpenter and James Matthew Hanley were the deputies who transported Tony to the Walker County Jail following his arrest. Carpenter allegedly stomped on Tony's genitals while he was on his back, with his hands handcuffed behind him. There are also claims that Carpenter and Hanley rammed Tony into the exterior of their patrol vehicle and kicked his legs. Hanley is also charged with giving false testimony to a federal grand jury. He testified that Tony walked to the patrol car, but he was in fact dragged. Both will be indicted later this month. These members of law enforcement are trusted to care for their inmates. And since this is a county jail, there are inmates there that are still considered innocent. They haven't had a trial and haven't been convicted of a crime. Tony was one of those. Instead of offering him even the most basic human rights, they let him slowly die over 2 weeks of hypothermia and sepsis, naked on a filth-covered concrete floor. According to several of their plea agreements, jail staff members stated that their inaction was due to the prevailing culture in the jail. I think there is a prevailing culture in all of Walker County law enforcement, but I think it's one that allows some of these staff members to be exactly the kind of people they are. One person leaked a video. The rest of them didn't report to anyone outside the jail. So who is in charge of the jail and the sheriff's department in Walker County? Sheriff Nicholas Smith. And we'll look at him in the next video in this series. And while the content of this video hasn't been my usual snark-filled diatribe, the video about Nicky Boy will be, so stay tuned. I would say that everyone I've talked about in this video is innocent until proven guilty, but it doesn't seem that it applies here. The more I discover about this case, the less I believe that Tony shot at deputies. After all, we only have their word for it, and I don't think that's worth much. The investigation into Tony Mitchell's death is ongoing. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment as this helps my channel grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.